everyone, this is another book recommendation video. This one is all about graphic novels. Now obviously I know there are some great graphic novels out there that I personally haven't read or are not on my bookcases. So don't take this list as final, there are more out there. Please leave links to videos and that down below. Add your own recommendations in the comments as well. Just so there's a resource for anybody who comes across this video that there are others out there. These are just a select few. First up, I'm going to start with Liberty Meadows. This is volume 1 called Eden, and these are by Frank Cho. Now, basically Liberty Meadows is a sanctuary for animals that have issues in their life. And it's very, very funny. It's quite a satirical look on life. And obviously because there's animals discussing issues that they have and neuroses and things like that, then a lot of fun can be poked at it, but also a lot of seriousness comes across in the panels. They're all black and white, as you can see, but because of the large format, they're nice and clear, they're not all squidged up, which makes it really hard to read. And they're just really amusing. There are 4 volumes for all the collected panels, and we do have all 4, and they are very, very funny and worth reading if you're into something a bit quirky that looks at serious issues in life while using animals as that tool to discuss things. I've picked up Runaways. This is volume 1, Pride and Joy. They are now being collected together because obviously the original run has finished, and they've got a new series being released in comic form at the moment, which looks at them when they're adults. And Runaways follows a group of children that discover their parents are the big bads in the city and decide they want nothing to do with the family business and run away, hence the title of the comics. All these teenagers have obviously all their teenage issues that they're growing up with, as well as dealing with the fact their parents are supervillains, and also that they have their own skills and gifts, which may be looked at as curses or not, depending on the character. Runaways covers quite a huge range of issues and discussion points, including relationships on a whole wide spectrum, and I really love these stories. I've read quite a few of them and I really enjoy them, but the artwork is very beautiful to look at. It's very gentle on the eyes. The Runaways series covers all sorts of storylines. We have a trip into the past at one point, which is very, very fun. I do have that as comics, and that was like the first collection I looked at because they were written by Joss Whedon, and then I started picking up the stories before that. Nothing is safe in this world. You know, it's one of those worlds where anything can happen. So be aware, there are some shockers out there. Try not to get yourself spoilt before you've read the stories. There is also going to be now a TV series based on the comics, so I'm really interested to see how they play that and where they take it. Are they just going to lift the storylines from the comics, which, let's face it, are pretty good, or are they going to go their own way with it? But we'll see how we go. This is Fables, written by Bill Willingham. There's loads of these. I think there's like over 20 issues of Fables. The whole story is now complete. And that's the story in itself. But Fables looks at all the fairy tale and storybook characters that have been displaced because of a war, and they now live in parts of downtown Manhattan called Fabletown, and everybody has a role to play within this place. If you are an animal fairy tale creature, you live up at the farm, because obviously we can't have talking pigs walking around Manhattan. It's just going to cause too many issues with the humans. Snow White is one of the main leads in this series, so we follow a lot of her storyline. And I like the way that the fairy tale world has been mixed up a little bit and dragged into the real world, and so these characters have their own issues. Snow White doesn't get on with her sister Rose Red, and there's a whole issue there, that the big bad wolf is actually a lot more dark and brooding than you think he is. So I quite like what was done with characters that we think we know really well, and it's like another spin on the fairy tales coming into our world. So fairy tales are your things, maybe give fables a go. There are several spin-offs. There's Fairest, which follows like the main princesses. There's also a series that follows Jack, who's kind of a little bit overlooked in the main series, but he's a really decent character. So if that's your kind of thing, give fables a go. Something a bit grittier and darker. This is Hellblazer, which some people will know as Constantine or Constantine, depending on how you pronounce it. These are collected comics, basically all brought together. There's quite a few of these, and they were written in the 80s in the UK, when life was pretty grim for a lot of people in this country. Obviously we had Margaret Thatcher in power, we had the whole unions being broken up, mass unemployment, strikes going on left, right and centre. The 80s was not a pretty time, and Hellblazer set very much in the 80s. It's certainly a good look at how society is at that point in the UK, as well as bringing in a little bit of the supernatural. I've picked Hellblazer because they're different from a lot of superhero stuff that is out now. A lot of superhero comics in the 80s were darker, were grittier, and there's this standing joke that the darker the superhero, the bigger the bulge in his pants, which, if you go and look at some Batman comics written at the time, is, yeah, there's a direct correlation there. But Hellblazer is one of those characters who is dark, he's brooding, he's just wanted to get through life, and there's not much magic in this. John Constantine, in the Hellblazer series, is not a big glamorous magician. He doesn't throw out magic left, right and centre because he knows there is a cost to it. As Rumpelstiltskin says, magic always comes with a price, and John Constantine knows this at this point. So if you want a dark, brooding John Constantine, read the Hellblazer series. If you want a slightly more light, mildly more upbeat, I would say John Constantine never gets upbeat about life. He doesn't have much to be upbeat about. But if you want that, then try out the DC reboot series of Constantine, and then there's also the Hellblazer, which took it a little bit darker. But there are different versions of the character about the place. But if you want dark, brooding 1980s UK with a little slash of magic thrown in, then you can't go wrong with some Hellblazer. This is Frey, written by Joss Whedon, and it is the spin-off from the Buffy the Vampire series. When this was written, I think Buffy was still on the telly. I'm not certain about that. But effectively, Frey is a far future slayer, where slayers haven't existed for ages. Demons now walk the earth, and the world as we know it has hugely changed. So if you wanted to see a bit of Buffy with like a futuresque look to her, and almost a completely alien world from the world we know, the Frey's a good starting point for that. It's a self-contained comic. You've got the whole story in here, which is quite nice. And boy, does some really weird things happen in here. But again, the artwork is very cool. It's very action-driven. And there's a lot of mythology in that ties into Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because obviously Joss Whedon kind of knows that. So it's well worth a read if you're a fan of Buffy, or you're a fan of like vampire lore and how things could change. Next up, I've got Asterix and the Big Fight. These are written by, I'm not even going to try and pronounce them. Asterix and the Big Fight is part of the Asterix graphic novel series. There are loads of these. To be frank, you could probably pick quite a few. But I asked husband, which one do you think is a good one, because he's read them all. He suggested this one because it covers a lot of different topics and is great fun as well. There's your artwork. That's kind of the thing you're going to expect looking into it. And Asterix follows a group of ghouls who are resisting the spread of the Roman Empire, and they're all super strong when they drink the magic potion that's created for them. Asterix is the brain of the group. Obelisk is the big muscle and brawn, and he's exceptionally large because when he was little he fell into the magic potion, and so he can't have any more, but he's always super strong. On a similar vein, I've picked up Tintin the Blue Lotus. This is my favourite Tintin story, and again, that's your kind of artwork. But I've picked the Blue Lotus out of all the Tintins, probably because it's not the most well-read one. People tend to plump for, like, Cigars of the Pharaoh and Seven Crystal Balls and all those sort of more fanciful ones. But Blue Lotus is my favourite one because Hergé actually teamed up with someone who was in China at the time, who knew the culture and could tell Hergé all these little details that he wasn't going to learn from a tourist guide, which is how he normally wrote his stories. And so the Blue Lotus has a lot more detail and a lot more respect towards the country that Tintin's gone to visit, and it's a pretty good plot actually. There's a lot going on. I mean, as usual, you know, Tintin should have been dead 3 or 4 times during the story. How this boy survives, I've no idea, and he's got a head like an iron weight, he must have. But it's certainly the one that I feel is the most detailed, it's the most respectful, and it's the strongest, I think, of the Tintin stories. And finally, something a bit fun. If you're sort of vaguely into Star Wars via the films, you couldn't go wrong with picking up Star Wars Tag and Bink Were Here. This is a graphic novel, and I actually think there's a follow-up to it as well, which follows the events of the film through the eyes of 2 guys called Tag and Bink. They occasionally cross over with the main characters, but hilarity ensues as they try and get from one dire situation to another dire situation and keep their heads, stay ahead of the Empire and keep out of the way of the rebellion and all the big fighting that they're going on. This is quite a hilarious story, I have to say. I really enjoyed it. The artwork's nice and clean and clear. It's very easy to read. The likeness is pretty good throughout as well, so you're going to recognise all the other characters there. But they meet up with all the main plot points of the main film. So that's kind of cool to actually see that. Want a bit of fun, bit of Star Wars, Tag and Bink. Can't go wrong. So that's the graphic novels I would recommend from my bookcases. Like I say, there are other graphic novels out there. There are some extremely profound graphic novels out there, but I kind of like my reading a little bit light. So please leave recommendations in the comments below for graphic novels that you think are worthwhile checking out. Give some of these a go if you're into those kind of topics or just want to try something new or something different. I know a lot of people tend to shy away from graphic novels because they think they're either tricky to read or they're not worth reading. Graphic novels have a lot to offer people, especially if you struggle with reading or you have a reluctant reader. A graphic novel is a lot less scary than a massive thick book to read. So there we are. As always, my social media links are in the description box down below. You can find me on Goodreads, Twitter and Instagram. Please say hi. And as always, thank you very much for watching and happy reading. Bye.